Welcome to Conversations with Life. This is Steve Cedar, and Soch and Keith. And we are going to talk about the very popular topic of money. Money on the meaning path. What is the role of money? How is that a container of consciousness? First off, to say that I hate the way that almost all spiritual people talk about money. It's either money is bad, it's destroying your ego, it's root of all evil, or if you aren't in alignment with money, you're really not doing it right. The assumption that if I'm doing the spiritual path right, or the meaning path right, money will flow into my life easily, and it's all just peaches because God's just going to open the windows of heaven, or the aliens are going to beam their money rays at me or something. I don't know. But honestly, it just pisses me off.
You're just dashing all my hopes. So.
I just
you thought we were in this for the money.
Yeah.
Fine, I quit.
Honestly, if you're in the spiritual game for the money, fucking get out. Go be a normie or just do something that isn't this, right? But
don't be in the guru path.
Yeah, the guru path or whatever. Yeah, if you're in the spiritual, the healing or the awakening game, and that's what you're experiencing, and you think that part of that is your life necessarily becoming enriched with a shit ton of money, well then I just don't know what to say about that. I just think my personal opinion of that is bullshit. It's bullshit. There's so much bullshit around money. There's so much energy in money. Partially because we can symbolize as human beings. One of the gifts that we have on the meaning path is to symbolize. So we can actually take actual experience and then create something that represents that actual experience. Mm-hmm. And then we can take something that represents the representation of the actual experience. And if you go about 10 layers out, you have money.
Yeah.
And by the time you get there, there's so much energy in it. When you have money, you have all material reality. You see how distant that is from our normal life? And it's also concentrated as it goes. So it's interesting, when you leave levels of reality, they don't actually become less energetic. They actually become more energetic. Me just being here with myself is just kind of like, hi, I'm here, right? Mm-hmm. Me, and I go to work. So I go to work, I do something, and I get something from it. That's great. But me getting money for something, it's like, ooh, somebody writes you that check or gives you that bill, and you're like, zing.
Right, and I'm putting more effort and energy in to get more of that money back. So I'm literally pouring more of my energy into that effort.
Yeah, because we symbolize it, it actually makes it more powerful. Just like if I tell my story, it's a story. I'm a normal dude. I can tell you my story. But if I tell you my story and I make it mythic, that's now a representation of the story, and the symbols and whatever become universal, and that gains more energy. So money is like that. Like as it becomes away from reality, if I do something, I get a reward. But now as we go on, it becomes more universal. And money is so universal in the material realm that it's just charged, right? Which makes it wonderful for consciousness. It's a great container of consciousness. How we are with money is a lot, and it's a good game.
Yeah, it feels like the difference between this is a simpler way for me to get eggs than having to, give eggs for lumber if the lumber guy doesn't need eggs, right?
Yeah.
Bartering versus actual.
Yeah. And then this actually means something about me. And we use this word value, and it's so interesting and even kind of frustrating for me, especially in the healer realm. For a while, I bought into the idea that I needed to charge really exorbitant prices because otherwise I was devaluing myself. That's what the coaches were telling me. Well, if you're giving your services away or if you're charging lower rates, you're actually devaluing your services. I played into that game for a while and learned some good things. But what I came to was, if I'm putting any dollar amount on my services, I'm devaluing them.
Yeah. I mean, value has to come
number
from somewhere else, right? Like education's a great example of this. It's like, I don't know if you're aware, but in this country, teachers are not paid super well. Right?
Oh, I'm aware.
I'm aware.
Yeah, right. But like everywhere, like even like in Australia, I was making like 95,000 a year for the same job 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But also my house was like 3 or 4 times as expensive as it is, right? So like proportionally, I still wasn't getting paid a great amount. And so in teaching, you have to be like, okay, my value has to come from somewhere else because my paycheck isn't going to cut it. I think I saw an equation that was, if I charged babysitting rates for all the kids that I watched for the amount of times I watched them, I'd have to be getting paid somewhere like $180,000 to $200,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
Babysitters rates, right? And it's like, but I also have to educate them. All that. It's like teachers are never going to find value in their paycheck. But I also think like there's the other side of that too sometimes, where we value ourselves as more valuable if we make less money.
Yes.
It's like, well, look at me. I don't charge anything for my services because I'm this charitable God who just gives them benevolently.
Absolutely.
So
right.
It's this grandiose poverty, right?
Yeah.
So
There's a
I'm
term.
not a good person if I serve the capitalist system. And if I do something that's real and I'm not going to get paid money, I get to feel
Superior.
Superior, yeah, exactly. But the truth is the system is completely backwards. If you serve money, you make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So if you're in finance, technology to some degree, even the medical system is mostly the insurance system, and it's a money game, right? So if you're in something that serves money, you'll get money. If you serve humans, you're not going to make much money.
You might get a lot of humans, though.
You might. You did make a lot of humans and impoverish yourself quite.
Yeah,
well.
I mean, but like even if you're not in the physically making humans game, right? You make connection. I feel like that's the trade-off, right? Is like I find value as an educator in the connection that I make, right? I make connections with people. I touch people's lives, right? The same happens if like, you're in the service industry, right? Like you're a hairdresser, you're not making money hand over fist, but you're making some really cool connection. So I feel like connection is like the spiritual equivalent of money. I don't know if I'm even saying that right, but like those two things I kind of feel like are the same side of the value equation.
Yeah. And is it true that if you serve money, you should make a lot of money? Is that a good game?
Should, I don't know about. Will, yeah. But
Yeah. Does that describe our reality? Are there people that make a lot of money and really are in the human game, serving humans at a human level? I mean, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. I think I know some, right? I think I know people that are doing it, but I don't know their inner lives, etc. So it's just interesting to look at, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it feels like, how would you do that, right? Like if your goal was to serve human, right, and connection, then you would by necessity have to charge a price for your service that was accessible to humans, right? And so then you're limited by time, right? If you're not limited by price point, you're limited by time. So if every single person now needs your service and can afford it, you're still limited by time. So you can't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, really, you do have to do sort of, like there is that balancing act of like, okay, if I have 8 hours in a day and that's, let's say 7 appointments per day, then I need to charge an amount that is going to make it worth my time so that I can survive or do whatever. And then that by necessity restricts the number of people who can come in and get your service, both through time and through price. So it feels like from an economic standpoint, the reason that if you serve money, you make money is because it's a representation. It's not a physical thing. It doesn't take up any more time to serve one business versus 100 businesses in the stock market, right? Like you're still doing the same basic functions. Whereas serving humans is limited by human. Right? You can't really serve 50 humans at once as well as you can serve one human at a time, right? Same as a classroom. The dream would be one-on-one education for every single person, right? And it's impossible. It doesn't work, right? So the same thing happens. Whereas money being a representation and a symbol can be served much more, like at a higher quantity, I guess.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You say it's not possible. It's infinitely possible. What else are we doing?
The one-on-one education thing?
Yeah. What else? It's infinitely possible. If we decided to not be distorted by the money game, we would do that. And in fact, that's kind of what parenting is. I think parenting isn't a real thing, but that's what being the parent of a human is. And It's infinitely doable. It's infinitely, by the way, there's enough resources on the planet for everybody to have enough.
Enough.
There's enough resources on the planet that everybody should be fine. But we find the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. It's a really funny game. So it's driving us to a polarity, which is what consciousness does. That's why the money game is the best
tool for consciousness. Because it makes a few people feel like they're really important for having money, and it makes people feel like they're really left out of this game. And as a whole, we're watching parts of ourselves, given it some kind of unity idea, we're watching parts of ourselves inhabit these far sides of what's possible for human material holding. But I feel like if you look at consciousness, as we've done a few times, as like consciousness is central and we are all part of a central consciousness, right? Then consciousness is experiencing every element of the material game, right? Mm-hmm. It is the homeless man on the street begging for change, right? At the same time, it's experiencing the entirety of the extremes. And if consciousness drives polarity, if polarity drives consciousness, it gives you kind of a new perspective on the shift of classes, especially in American society right now, where the middle class is becoming almost non-existent. The rich are getting richer to the extreme and the poor are getting poorer to the extreme. And so the middle class is dwindling and movement up classes is almost non-existent, right? And so you can see that if you looked at that through the lens of polarity driving consciousness, that shift away from the middle starts to make some sense and follows a pattern that happens in a lot of different aspects. So it's sort of interesting because I think a few people are seeing themselves as worthless because they don't have a lot, and a few are seeing themselves as worthwhile and valuable because they have a lot. And I would say a few see themselves as valuable for having a lot, and then a shit ton of people are seeing themselves either as not valuable because they don't have anything, or are having to find their value elsewhere because they don't have the money thing. And so it's an interesting separation because much more people statistically experience poverty than wealth, right? So it's kind of a weird system. And then you have the polarity on the inside of the poverty spectrum of you're going to either find value elsewhere and feel valuable regardless, or you're going to feel like you're worth nothing because that's what your bank account says. And then you have the grandiose poverty where you find value in your poverty. And I'm like, This is just so...
I'm cooler than the rich people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not surprising that you find something that we give so much energy to polarizes. Right? Like that's what anything with a lot of energy does.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to feel the effects of that and to not call it good or evil. One of the things that we do with money is we go, oh, look at that's bad or that's good. And I think it's good to recognize some distortions that it creates. But just to see that what we're doing is polarizing ourselves. And we'll do that all the time. And the goal of that is to see ourselves in it.
Yeah, I was really raised in that kind of grandiose poverty mindset. It's interesting because we were still like middle class. Had our needs met, but it was like on purpose. My dad chose for us to live in a poor neighborhood, and the family spending habits were pretty meager, and by necessity. There were a lot of us, but also he preached it. He was always making cutting remarks about Californians or the people up on the hill. And that was an interesting thing, and still is even for me to kind of be with, because I think part of what his energy was going towards is that there are things that are of such high value that money you could never pay enough for them. And those are the things that he really wanted to live for, but almost the way that he was trying to do that created this sense of superiority around poverty, which has made it actually harder for me to make a living because it created some resistance and belief systems that I feel wrong when I have money or when I get new things.
So it's interesting because I have a very different experience, right? So like my dad was like dropped out of school in 9th grade, moved to Australia and like picked himself up by his bootstraps and started a business, all the things, right? The American dream, but a bit further south. And like did it himself. And so like for him, like wealth was the measure of success and still is, right? the hardest thing I ever did for my dad to comprehend was choosing education over law and accounting, which is what I was qualified in. Harder than me joining the LDS church. And in fact, the hardest part of that decision for him was tithing, right? Like, so he's very wrapped up in that thing. And so for me, it's been a really difficult thing to prioritize, because my thing is I prioritize joy and experience over wealth, right? Because being an accountant, power to you accountants who for some reason have found this podcast, is fucking miserable. Accounting is miserable. I hated it. It was awful. I was just angry every day, right? And found so much joy in teaching. And so I had to prioritize, okay, I'm going to make a lot less money, but I'm going to be happier every day, right? But I still struggle now with like being someone who is firmly in the middle class, right? Like I need to get a better job. Nope, I can't do that because I'm prioritizing joy, right? I don't want to be an accountant. I don't want to be a lawyer, right? So it makes it really difficult to be appreciative of what you have when you're thinking that your success is only real if it hits a certain threshold. So the opposite experience of being like, I know I'm happier now than I was as an accountant, but I'm also like frustrated by my lack of disposable income.
Yeah.
No matter where you are in that financial game, it hurts.
Yeah.
And then you have to grow because of the pain, right?
It's ridiculous. One of the funny things is that money doesn't mean anything. We are the meaning containers, right? And money is an extension of us. So it's funny that we should feel bad or good about having money or not having money, right?
Yeah.
It's part of the whole programming, and there's so much energy in it that we have to face ourselves. It's also the way the world works, just from a very practical level.
Right.
If I'm going to live, my brother knows a guy in New Mexico who swore off money, right? But there's a lot of people who have to earn money for him to not have money. Ram Dass said the same thing. His guru told him not to have money. Ram Dass should not touch money. He had to have people follow around and pay for stuff for him.
Yeah.
And it just emphasized to him the importance of money. It's such a funny game. We cannot get out of this container. And so we need to kind of dive in. The best teaching I've ever heard on money was Carolyn Lovewell, I think now. And she said, look, here's how you deal with money. Understand. Basically, they're a pro-money kind of person, right? So there's a bias here, but I am not a pro-money person or a pro-not-money person. I think it's funny and ridiculous and a really beautiful container for consciousness. But she said that money is the worst thing ever. You got to see that. Money can be manipulated. It's used by the rich to devalue the poor. The rich manipulate. They play the money game in order to make the poor poorer. The reason why the poor are getting poorer isn't because the poor aren't making more money. It's because our money becomes less valuable because the rich are playing fucking games with it and we're making it less valuable all the time. Meanwhile, they make a whole different set of rules for themselves to make more money, so it doesn't matter if it's devalued because they'll just pull more out of their ass. Money is the worst thing ever. It's evil. It's manipulative. Money is also the best thing ever. Money has allowed us to cooperate on a wide scale. Sure. Anything that you want and to produce can be compensated for money. Anything that you want to buy, you can pay money for. This creates an efficiency that makes things move so fast, so beautifully. I can go buy somebody's book. They produce because they can sell it for money, right? Otherwise, I'd have to track that person down. I can go read The Untethered Soul rather than having to track down Mickey Singer on this place in Florida. The money allows that to happen. Otherwise, I would have had to got my knapsack on my stick and walked across the country to go see the sage.
I mean, global economies, it's only possible because of money.
It's a rapid reward for creation. There's so many good things. Now, there's distortions that are caused by that, and we can put that in the evil category. But just the wide scale complexity and cooperation that can happen in ways we can't even fathom. Somebody pulled up a pencil and was like, how many people produce this pencil? You think about it. Between the people that harvested it, designed it, or shaped it, or each little part of it, the metal, but that pencil probably had thousands of people cooperating to bring that to me. And I picked it up for 30 cents, 10 cents, whatever. What does a pencil cost these days? Probably $5.
Yeah, like way more. Yikes.
Right?
Fucking money, man.
That level of cooperation and complexity is intense. And it's beautiful. It's a harmony that's created. So money is the best thing ever. Now, if you can hold those two things in your mind at the same time, you have what's needed. And that's, you're in the polarity. You're not getting played by either side of it. Because if you can't go dark on money, you're stupid. It's these spiritual materialists that are like, money is holy because I feel like it is and I want it and I just don't want to admit it. And really my shadow wants it, but I'm not going to admit that. So I'm going to call it holy, and it has to be good. And you have to be on the frequency of wealth or some other shit that people say. It pisses me off. And then on the other side, if you can't see the beauty of it, the sheer wonder of this amount of cooperation, the level of cooperation that we can achieve and what we can do with that is really something. So then you're somebody who's a wealth, you'll feel better about yourself because you can't see that beauty, but it's still there. We're still cooperating on this wide scale. I mean, I hope someday we make money off of this podcast. That'd be great. I don't need it. I don't do this for money, right? But I understand that money's great. And if I offer value this way, I'm in it for the meaning game. I'm in it for my personal game because I feel like I should say things. And because the conversation feels juicy. It's lovely. But if money comes from that, I'm so happy for that. That's awesome.
I had literally never thought of that before in my life. Like, have been seeking money my whole life. I never once thought, like, why? Why is it good? Oh, because global corporations. I want stuff, man. Like, I am an educator who is obsessed with tech. That's a very difficult polarity to hold yourself in. You want the iPhone fucking 16, but you make less than $70K a year. You're fucked, man. Like, that's just weird. But seeing it as like that facilitator of really global cooperation is a really obvious perspective that we just don't talk about very much.
Well, and the things we want are good. We're really fucked up about our desires. There's one thing that money does, right? What do you want? Yeah. Right? And then we have to decide, well, I want meaning. Like, materialism is funny because it says it's already decided for you. It's like, you want stuff, and spiritualism is funny because it's kind of already decided for you. You want God, You want bliss or God or whatever.
Connection or something.
Yeah, right. Some other thing. And it's like, yeah, I want all those things. And here's the other so funny thing about the desire. It's just like money. I don't believe it. And Keith Singer says this. What you really want is peace and freedom. You can't get there from there. But if I don't listen to my desires, I'm also fucked.
Yeah.
Or not fucked, as it might be. But like, if I don't...
You're fucked up. Is what you want.
If you don't listen to your desires, you're also in some kind of denial of self, right? And those kind of go with those poles again. Like, if I don't listen to my desires, if I don't hold them as understanding myself, then I'm probably going to get played by them. And if I totally dive into my desires and think that's all there is about me, I'm also going to get played by that. I'm just going to be one slavering dog chasing the bell every time. So it's such a good thing. I love money. I hate it. I love it. It will either ruin us or make us, and maybe both.
So what would you say to a client that comes to you and says, I'm so frustrated because I've done all this work with money, all this healing, subconscious, I can't pay my bills.
Yeah.
And I work hard every day.
Yeah, the client's been me asking myself that. But like, I would say, do you feel that tension? Your need and your inability. Like, I'm not making it as a father. I'm not making it as a mother. I'm not contributing. Whatever. There it is. Keith was describing his tension with money, like I'm a teacher and I want things.
Yeah.
There it is. That's it. That's the life. Our desires meeting our capacity, or where we are, or how we are. Our desires playing themselves against each other. Our deeper desires meeting our external desires. That's it. That's the spark, So dive in there and see what's there. On a practical level, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But dive in there, and I think that the stuff that's there is the sauce. That's the juice, right? That's the thing. If there's a discrepancy between your needs and your capacity to make money, there's really good seeing there. Whatever the hell that is. In a good society, in my conception of a good society, there is no poor. There are only people who aren't maybe quite living up to the level that they want. And so you take this amount of energy and blame and shame and all the shit we hold around money is distortion. Creates a distortion. So it's hard to see. But in a good society, like they could do nothing and get by just because they're human.
We're going into socialism now. Let's dive in.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? Socialism is a political form.
Right.
It's not a human form. So if I decide to share my resources with the community and there's no power structure, it's not socialism.
True.
So this word that people use, socialism, basically what they're saying is that the state should run the money. I say, in a good society, the state has no power over the money, and there's enough civil society that takes care of people. That would be the ideal. As soon as you give that to the government, then you combine power and the energy of money, which is what we've done most places. And it's rapidly destructive, if you ask me. When I say society, I don't mean socialism. And I don't not mean socialism. It might look something like that. The agencies or the groups that would care for people wouldn't be the same that have the guns.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think
in that way.
I mean, problems we have with that is like when that is the case, right? Like the way I think about that, if I'm like, okay, so if I was an educator in a society like that, I would assume that the families of the people that I educate would be the ones who would be taking care of me.
Or
a communal fund.
Yeah, some kind of communal fund that would be raised to that effect. That would be the best.
Yeah. And then I look at that and I go, like, does that take away from some of the perks of money? Like, would that take away from the global cooperation piece? No, not really, right? Would it take away from some of the evils of money? Yeah, a little bit, right? So what is it that stops us? Because, like, you talk to your average American about sharing their wealth, and it's like you're asking them to donate bodily organs that they're still needing. I mean, like, it's hugely tied to our sense of success, value, identity, to the point of being like, you almost, not even almost, religions, the only reason that they succeed in getting you to be charitable is because they link it to morality and to value, right? Like they say charity is the ultimate love of Christ. So that what they're really saying is be charitable or you're a dick compared to Christ, right? It's kind of sad that it seems so insanely impossible that I would end up in a community that's what just happens, right? Because there is something about money that just clings to your sense of self. Or maybe we cling to it or whatever it is, but it feels almost parasitic, symbiotic.
Absolutely.
It's huge.
Absolutely. Well, and because of that, we have to divide ourselves out of it. And what a good game. We should. Keith, you don't really want technology. You want whatever energy technology creates in your body.
Right.
If we could live a simple life and be happy, it would be so easy. Again, that's how we would do it. But I also don't eschew complexity. It's just that the human has to drive it. So, see, that world is possible if we come back to our humanity. If we look at money, and here's the funny thing about capitalism, and this has been recognized long time by most economists, is that it will eventually eat itself.
Yeah.
The rich will get richer, the poor will get poorer. There will come a time where that becomes unstable, like any too big polarity container that you can't hold, and it will die a painful and bloody death. And communism is the same. It's just a different game with power. If you put all power in one container and nobody else has power, you're supposed to, a group of people supposed to do whatever the other group of people are supposed to do, and that becomes absolute at some point. That's also polarity that can't be held. So it will die a death. And the thing is that, like, for instance, inflation. How long can inflation go, right? We're running on imagination money right now.
Yeah,
absolutely. There is no value. It really is ridiculous. I mean, I'm impressed how much they've held it.
I mean, we talk about hyper capitalism and the rise of the capitalist aristocracy sort of situation that we have going on right now. And it's like, if you take our current economic system and overlap it to feudal France's political system, looks really fucking similar.
It's very similar. So the system can't sustain itself. It's going to die.
Someone's going to invent the guillotine.
And we are going to have to create a better world. So it's going to be more human. This is what happens with the war cycle and all sorts of economic cycles, is that we'll get ourselves into this place of non-sustainability. The supply lines will become too big. And eventually we'll have to create something else. We'll have to get back to ourselves. It occurs to me there's several ways to work with money with consciousness, right? And any of these can be conscious paths. One is I can become an ascetic, meaning I eschew all worldly stuff. I'm going to live very simply. I'm going to go live in a hut and eat rice and beans, right? So I can do that. You can do that consciously, I think. It's not a bad path. Not mine. I don't want to do that. But I think people can do that without feeling righteous, without feeling superior. They just simply prefer simplicity.
It's funny that we do that for vacation.
Yeah, we kind
We
of
go
do.
camping.
Yeah.
Camping, right? Like get out of this and supply the simplicity. We have to do a lot of complexity to create that simplicity.
Yeah.
Like Gandhi said, there's a lot of people who've spent their fortunes keeping me poor.
Yes. Yeah.
Another thing we can do is dive into materialism. Materialism and consciousness have a really thorny relationship. On the higher ends of wealth, there are those who see it. The Jim Carrey experience, where he got rich and famous, and he's like, "Oh, but I still suck." And then he's like,
He like exploded.
"Yeah," because consciousness was trying to come through him. His life was trying to live itself through him, and it's like, all this stuff is getting in the way. Do art, brother. It's his own consciousness, I imagine, said to Jim Carrey at some point. Do art. Changed.
So is there another?
Yeah. Piracy.
Oh, I'm down for some piracy.
And lately, so in the last 2 weeks, I've made more money than I have the whole rest of the year.
Okay, nice.
And I've worked for a year to be able to become a successful day trader. The point of this is it's the stupidest game ever. And it was designed to make you lose. 90% plus of traders lose their money. But just like the pirates, if you could do it, if you could pull it off, piracy, a lot of times, it wasn't just people trying to be stupid and evil. It was a materialist type of system where Britain would take all your stuff and then have to make the goods and then sell it back to you. So you sell the raw materials to them. They would make all the goods in their factories, which were making them rich. And then they would sell them back to you. They would buy your stuff, and you had to sell to them. Mercantilism, that's the one I'm looking for.
Yes.
So mercantilism. And it was a terrible, terrible system. So the pirates were like, fuck this.
Something else.
I lost my farm. I did this. I couldn't work in the factory all day. It was sucked. And so they were like, oh, we'll just have to take it. And so my day trading is a bit of piracy. And so I plan on taking a shit ton of money out of the markets and putting it into efforts to build a better world.
Cool.
And when I tell people that, they look at me kind of like, what the fuck? I don't get you.
You're not a day trader. You're a day buccaneer.
Day buccaneer. and honestly, and that's kind of what I feel like is one of the only honoring answers right now is because I'm playing the money game and I see the money game and I'm playing it as consciously as possible. I'm sure it gets to play me some too. And then I'm consciously steering that into something else.
Yeah.
Or at least that's my intention. So that's a funny game. That's hilarious. It's kind of like consciousness meeting itself and going, huh. And you can do this in any profession. You can be an accountant, right? And then instead of like getting all caught up in accountant stuff, make a whole bunch of money and, I don't know,
funnel it into somewhere else.
Build art. Create something cool.
Yeah.
Create something free for yourself. Look around and the people around you and see what you can create for them, right? Like I said, those institutions that we need that aren't the government, those organizations that can be the churches. The churches do a lot of good that way, although that's become bent because they're all political and all this shit. The institutions that should be in the middle, making the world a better place, should be more powerful and have more money. No real good place for them right now. There's lots of good people doing lots of good things. It should be bigger than government. They should have more money than government.
Yeah.
You know, in an ideal world. So it's up to people who make a lot of money to steer their money into conscious endeavor or to create container the rest of us, the rest of the world.
And you see it sometimes. Like you'll see, there's a water company, I can't remember the name of them right now, but their whole schema is like, we make and bottle water, and then we use that to literally build water access in third world countries. That's the whole thing. And they get sales, they get customers because people are like, I want to do that, and I need bottled water, right? So it's like it does exist. Like we have some of those sort of, I'd call them like the Robin Hood of
conscious capitalists.
So I'm like, that does exist, and I think about that as like, probably that was the most optimistic view of economic deconstruction I've ever heard. Yours. Like, it's all going to explode, but it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. Like in politics, right? Washington's farewell address was like, eventually you're going to get so bipartisan that one dictator will come from the middle and pray that he's a good guy because it's going to implode. And we look at that in all the way down to family dynamics, right? You have generationally, you've got a generation that is hard love and tough love and college and education and all the rest and punishment and spankings. And then the next generation that's like, oh, gentle parenting and like way too far the other way. And then they raise kids who are like, I got to fucking put some strictness in my kids because they'll grow up like me otherwise. They're going another direction. And it's all kind of like, you sort of, I've been obsessed with some like family TikTok things lately. And it's very much like trying to bring these two halves together to like what is good parenting and what is good family raising. And it's like, you can't be your parents and you can't be your grandparents either anymore. Like, it's like they're all fucked up from different perspectives. And it seems like it is that thing of like every polarity eventually needs to implode and find a way to like to reconcile itself. And so it's interesting. I've never thought about, I've always been like, the world will end. Hopefully I'll already be dead. And now I'm kind of like, the world will end and hopefully I get to be part of the pirate group.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like...
Well, I'm glad that you brought the family thing up because that's kind of been buzzing with me since you talked first about some kind of utopian or ideal community setup. And absolutely I've had challenges with the way that I was raised around money, but largely there's something really beautiful there. Where in my family field with my parents and siblings, we got each other's back. We don't even particularly like each other that well right now because some of us left the church, etc. But like, they're not going to let me starve.
Right.
Or my kids. And it's beautiful because in some cases I've had nieces, nephews come out as queer or whatever, and you know, I've been a safe haven for them. Well, that charge in their family dynamic worked out, and vice versa. My kids have gone to relatives that have more means to help them get a leg up. To me, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that all of us have that heart. All of us have that capacity to see people in our immediate field and go, maybe I don't have cash in hand right now, but there's probably a resource that I have available to make this situation a little better, a little easier.
It's funny, we talked about how like different my rearing around money was than yours, but that truth holds itself in my family too. Of like, yeah, my parents just give all the money they have just goes to their kids.
Yeah.
And like if I needed $500 from my brother right now, he would be like, okay, cool, I'll send it over to you. Like, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
Because it holds true that connection is greater than means. You know what I mean? And it's a truth that even like when you see someone betraying that truth or betraying that reality, it is a self-betrayal.
Yeah.
If someone is holding money to be more important than humanity, you can see the betrayal of the self happening in that person. And like that's really the thing that holds our hope for what Steve's talking about is like that truth will supersede or be greater than the draw of money, right? And like if it holds true in a family of maybe a little bit of grandiose poverty, and a family of way too like materialist value. What's the opposite of grandiose poverty? Just grandiose wealth. Whatever. Right. If that truth holds between both of our families, that's a really hopeful statement that like then hopefully in all fields we can look at this and be like money is a container for consciousness. And if consciousness is suffering because I am holding on to my money, then I need to let go. And if consciousness is suffering because I am villainizing money, then I need to make that shift too. Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, cool.
Awesome.
So yeah, money as a consciousness container is really interesting, and it's so tempting to sell consciousness.
Well, because it's everywhere, Steve.
Yeah. And to me, that's the biggest betrayal.
Yeah.
We know innately that there's some things that cannot be bought and there's some things that cannot be sold. And they're not what you think, right? Most people, right? Because there isn't a necessary morality. There's no defined morality. There's only our ability to hang with it, if that makes sense. So when we can hang with money, money stops being evil.
Okay, that's what you're saying. It's not intrinsically good or evil.
Intrinsically good or evil. When we can see either both or none, right? And it's actually the same thing. When you see none, you see both. When you see both, you see none. That's how polarity works. Then it doesn't have that charge, or at least it doesn't have a charge that's more than us.
Yeah.
What I experience in the world is a lot of people go to jobs they hate, and they do shit that they didn't want to do because they knew they could get a steady flow of money from that. It's a slow death, right? It's dying before you're dead.
Yeah.
So
it is. And it's the death of everything.
You start to feel used. When I started to feel that way, the spark was off of education for me. I had to get out.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it anymore.
It's not even just like the death of the self either. It's the death of everything, like the death of connection.
Yeah.
Like when I was an accountant and miserable every day, I was a mean asshole.
Yeah.
Like I'd get home and just be pissed off and be like, everyone leave me the fuck alone, which meant I had no friends.
What will make me feel better? I'm going to go treat other people like shit because they should know they're less than me. Because I know that I've demeaned myself to my conscious being.
Right.
I think you can work any job with consciousness, by the way. I think you can do any life situation with peace and happiness if you hold it just like it is. Better, easier said than done, of course.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing we can not do. But there's containers that are less likely to hold our happiness. And when we have exchanged money for meaning, we've violated something very, very essential in a way that we're not likely to easily get back. It's not easy to come back from that place.
Yeah.
And that's why we do it.
On a really wild journey going from a homemaker, no income whatsoever, to a midwife, to a sex worker, to a housekeeper, to a coach. And most of the work that I do right now, hour by hour, is housekeeping. And I love it. And it's just been a really interesting container because I thought I was going to do this spiritual thing and I was going to become this high profile coach. And because I was able to be with it, I've been able to like morph into these different containers.
Right.
And just enjoy what I'm doing.
You are.
And there are times where a door closes. That midwifery door is pretty hard closed right now. I feel like part of me will always be a midwife. But there was a point where I thought, I'm going to be that granny midwife that's catching babies in her 70s. And that door closed a lot faster than I thought. But I think you're right. When you just open yourself to what's possible, I'm available for what's possible. And I think that comes back to this whole question I asked Steve earlier. How do you counsel the person that's not making ends meet? It takes you right to the life of it. In the life of that tension.
Yeah.
And great story. Steve's story was one of my favorites. Somebody might hand you a bag of money.
Yeah, I got my inheritance in the form of a big bag of dimes with $10,000. All right. It was hilarious. And I felt it coming. I was like, I didn't have any money. My client load right now is pretty light. And just doing a lot of other things. And the trading hadn't paid off yet. And I was like, well, I don't have money to pay for anything this month. And I got other these things up here to pay for. And I just wasn't, like, nothing in me was worried about it. It was really just interesting, like an interesting calm. And then I showed up the next day to my dad's house and he hands me literally a bag. I'm like,
it's like
robbed the bank.
Yeah,
it's like what
has a dollar sign on the side. Yeah,
it was beautiful. And I've lived my way. I was talking to somebody recently about this, living hand to mouth and just trusting the universe. That's where I've been living for the last 3 years. Just that, like okay, money is coming in around me, and it is things are getting done.
It's sufficient to your needs.
It's sufficient, and all that felt really lovely. It feels like I'm moving into an entirely different container now, and it's all good to me. I'm the same with $1 million in the bank as I am sitting here. Like I think those are different challenges with consciousness, and I welcome all of those challenges.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm probably living in the space right now where I am the least financially secure I've ever been in my entire life. I'm also by far the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. I'm terrified every fucking day that I'm not going to be able to pay the power bill, but it's the same thing. I just feel calm. Like, I don't feel like I'm clenched and terrified. I'm like, yeah, she's got my back. We'll take care of it. We'll figure it the fuck out.
Yeah. And when you're in the meaning path, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Something else is living through you and it's doing itself and money will show up with it. And this is another thing I wanted to mention is that left to itself, energy goes up. Right?
Yeah.
So sap rises and sun comes up, sun goes down, sun comes up again. Energy in our system, when we stop interfering with it, rises. And with it, there's this energy of abundance, right? That might mean money. It might mean other things. It might mean anything, right?
Resource, capacity, level.
But there is a place where we can let go, relax, and let energy move through us. And when it does that, we'll have anything we need and everything we need when we need it, as we need it. Trying to create security around it, trying to create predictability around life in any way, right? Creates stuck flow. And also, we recognize container. Just understand that the energy is always more important.
Yeah. I feel like one of the things that's been the juxtaposition that I had to like really wrap my head around is trying to create security inevitably creates fear and instability, right? And so like being secure but in a broken relationship is awful.
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah.
So you're better off breaking it and expanding into the new container of whatever it is, right? And so like that's the thing I've had to let go of is like I don't have a strict plan. My budget is a loose fucking napkin instead of an app and a spreadsheet. And it's been really weird. I'd say the last 3 months since moving in together, never in my life have I not had my primary bank account on my phone. Never. And just by how it's worked out, we sort of merged our accounts with my partner's accounts. And so she's had all the access and she's never been in charge of the money ever in her relationships. And so I'm like, how the fuck am I doing this right now? How am I not freaking the hell out that someone else controls my money? And she's sitting there like, how am I not freaking out that I control this entire family's money right now? And I'm like, because the stability, we didn't have to create security. We created the stability in our relationship. We grew into trust in the relationship, in this container that we've created, this household that we've created. And so I am controlling the money.
Yeah.
And she isn't controlling the money at the same time because we as a unit, as a container that is this household, have a firm hand on the money, even if it's neither of mine. And it's just weird to like exist in that space. I'm like, this is just odd to live in. But it's that thing you were talking about before where it's like the humanness has to matter more than that financial piece. It's just been really cool.
Yeah, and anytime you are putting energy into creating security, you are arguing for insecurity.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're constantly afraid of insecurity.
Right.
Which means you're giving a lot of energy
and that's kind of what
insecurity.
Any polarity we talked about the same thing with worthiness. Anytime you're trying to prove your worth, you're also arguing for your unworthiness. And that's beautiful. Like that's what polarity does. And then eventually
you come to that.
We're like, oh, okay, I'm done playing on either side of that game. Yeah. Like what's in the middle?
You can hold them both and hold none.
Yeah.
Keith, in your story about the family finances and whatever, the layer under, right? So we created security in the relationship, but you created security in yourself.
Sure.
You know, when you show up for yourself, then you can really be in that kind of relationship where there's trust. But you've got to show up with yourself. That's the thing. That's ultimately the thing, and that the gift of money, I think, is that it takes us out of ourselves. It's just static. That's what ecstasy is. It takes us out of ourselves so that we can see ourselves.
It's true.
When your energy's all the way out here, something in you goes, wait a second, what's going on back here? And eventually you'll have to see yourself. Yeah. I think we're doing this as a society. I think we're so far out of ourselves into the money game, you know, and it's like, it's this consciousness winking at itself going, haha. We're creating this ridiculous bullshit game over here. Haves and have-nots and manipulation and misunderstanding, etc. And eventually we'll have to see ourselves. I got a call a month ago, and it's the guy going, "You have a warrant out for your arrest. You need to pay me $1,000. You need to pay $1,000 on this website, or we're going to come get you," or something, basically. And for about 10 seconds, I was like, "Oh,
is this me?"
Right. And then I'm like, who is doing this? Who is this scam? I should have asked him, like, what's better for you to do? Like, do you want to question your life experiences?
Right? For clients.
These couple guys that were like, "Yeah, we're police officers. Go to this website and pay $1,000, That's getting played by money pretty hard. It's getting pretty taken out of yourselves, where you're pretending to be somebody else so that you can hurt somebody else in a material way.
That human.
It's so far from human. At some point, that human will have to get busted. And if they don't, they'll be the agent of busting a lot of other people to create more consciousness.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. We sure love the richness of these conversations, and we hope you do as well. We would love your feedback. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends so that we can keep building a community of beautiful conversation.